Jessica Hill was the kind of roommate everyone thought they could trust, until Emily Carter was found dead upstairs at the biggest party of the year, and a single clue buried under her fingernail exposed the killer hiding in plain sight. The last Friday of the semester at Westwood University had an electricity in the air that only came once a year. Students had been counting down to this night for weeks, swapping rumors about the massive off-campus party that was sure to be the biggest event before winter break. The house hosting it sat just a few blocks from campus, a two-story rental, with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. But to the students, it was legendary. Its owner, a senior named Mark Daniels, had a reputation for throwing wild gatherings that would be talked about for months afterward. By the time the first students arrived, the street outside was already lined with cars. Music pounded so loudly that you could feel the bass in the sidewalk. Strings of colored lights framed the front door, and the faint smell of beer and cheap perfume drifted through the air. Inside, the living room was packed shoulder to shoulder, with people, voices shouting over the music. In the kitchen, tables sagged under the weight of plastic cups, open bottles, and hastily assembled snacks. The backyard glowed with more lights, where students huddled in groups, laughing, dancing, and posing for pictures. Emily Carter slipped through the front door around 10 that night, her hair pulled back neatly, wearing a fitted black dress that made her stand out in the crowd. She was a senior too, known across campus for her perfect grades, leadership in the debate club, and her poised, confident manner. Even in a room full of noise and chaos, people noticed when Emily walked in. She greeted a few friends and made her way through the crowd, occasionally pausing to wave at someone or accept a drink offered with a smile. To anyone watching, she looked completely at ease. But beneath the surface, there were things no one at the party could see. Emily had been juggling a demanding semester and a growing list of personal tensions, some with people who were also in that house that night. She didn't talk about those issues publicly, but there had been whispers in recent weeks. Even so, she gave no hint of stress as she moved from one group to another, laughing, sipping from her cup, and taking a few photos with classmates. The night rolled on, the music growing louder, the air heavier with the smell of sweat, alcohol, and cologne. Around 11:30, Emily was last seen heading upstairs. Witnesses later disagreed on whether she was alone or followed by someone, but several remembered her carrying the same red plastic cup she'd been holding all night. The second floor was quieter, with only a few people drifting between rooms. One of the bedrooms, normally used for storage, had its door left ajar. Downstairs, the party surged on without anyone realizing something terrible had happened. The clock ticked toward midnight, and in the kitchen, students argued about music choices while others crowded into the backyard for fresh AI or IT. Wasn't until just after midnight that the discovery was made. A group of 3 students, looking for a quieter spot to talk, climbed the stairs and pushed open the half-closed door of the storage room. Inside, the dim light from a small lamp cast long shadows across the cluttered floor. And there, on the carpet, lay Emily Carter. She wasn't moving. At first, they thought she might have passed out from drinking too much. But the closer they looked, the more it became clear something was wrong. Her skin was pale, her lips slightly blue, and faint bruising marked the sides of her neck. One of them gasped, dropping the cup they'd been holding. The others froze, staring in disbelief. Then, chaos erupted. Shouts rang out over the music, which abruptly stopped as words spread through the house. Dozens of people crowded the upstairs hallway, trying to see what had happened. Some stood frozen, others hurried back downstairs, fumbling with their phones to call the police. The room quickly became contaminated as people stepped inside, brushing against the furniture, leaving footprints, and disturbing what might have been evidenced. By the time the police arrived minutes later, the scene was a mess. Partygoers spilled out onto the front lawn, murmuring to one another in hushed voices. Inside, officers moved quickly to secure the upstairs, but it was already too late to preserve the crime scene perfectly. They examined Emily's body, noting the bruising on her neck and the open window just a few feet away. Cold air seeped into the room, hinting that whoever had done this might have escaped that way. The mood outside the house shifted from confusion to fear. Nobody wanted to believe what had just happened. A night meant for celebration had turned into a nightmare. Emily Carter, One of the most admired students on campus was gone, and somewhere in that crowd of familiar faces had been the person responsible. Detectives began their work immediately, moving through the house with careful precision despite the chaos left by the party. The clutter of cups, spilled drinks, and discarded jackets made it difficult to see where the crime began and where the mess of the evening ended. Every corner of the upstairs was photographed, every object bagged and labeled. Outside, a small team searched the perimeter of the house, scanning the ground beneath the open bedroom window. The dirt below was uneven, but there were no clear footprints, just trampled patches of grass from partygoers moving between the backyard and the side alley earlier in the night. The first priority was to establish Emily's movements before her death. Witnesses remembered seeing her in different parts of the house between 10 and 11:30. She had spoken with several people, including classmates, casual acquaintances, and even Mark Daniels, the host. Most said their conversations were brief, nothing heated or unusual. Still, every account was taken down carefully. The problem was that alcohol and loud music had blurred the timeline for many, leaving their memories unreliable. Mark Daniels became a natural focus for investigators simply because the house was his. He told them he barely knew Emily outside of class, but detectives soon found multiple photos of the two together on his social media, dated months earlier. When asked about this, Mark claimed they had worked on a group project and attended a few mutual events, nothing more. He seemed calm, even cooperative, but detectives noted the way he avoided certain questions, particularly about where he had been during the crucial window between 11:30 and midnight. While detectives interviewed students in the living room, rumors began spreading across campus. Word traveled fast through texts and social media, and by morning, the story had reached nearly every dorm room. Some claimed Emily had been in a complicated relationship that ended badly. Others insisted there had been an academic dispute involving stolen notes or exam answers. None of these claims had proof, but they kept investigators aware that the motive might not be as straightforward as it first appeared. The forensic team returned later in the day to comb the upstairs more thoroughly. In the bedroom where Emily was found, they collected a red plastic cup resting on a small table near the wall. It stood out because it was the only cup in the room and still contained a faint trace of liquid. Latent fingerprints were lifted from its surface. On the floor, near the corner of the bed, strands of hair were discovered, long, dark, and tangled in the fibers of the carpet. They were not Emily's. The open window continued to puzzle detectives. It was possible someone had escaped through it, but the lack of a clean exit path suggested another scenario. It might have been staged to make it appear as though the killer had fled that way. The cool night air had drifted into the room for hours, potentially damaging or erasing scent traces a dog unit could have picked up. When they reviewed the layout of the house, investigators realized the upstairs hallway connected to a narrow back stairwell that led to the kitchen. If someone wanted to leave the room quietly and avoid the crowded main staircase, they could have slipped out that way without being noticed. This detail made them reconsider earlier witness statements. Several students had mentioned seeing people they didn't recognize moving in and out of the kitchen late in the night, but no one could describe them clearly. Back at the station, detectives began mapping out a timeline. Emily entered the party at 10. She was last seen heading upstairs at 11:30. The discovery of her body happened shortly after midnight. That gave them a window of roughly 40 minutes in which the murder could have occurred. The fingerprints from the cup were sent to the lab for urgent processing, along with the hair samples. The results could narrow their list of suspects significantly. In the meantime, they returned to Mark Daniels. His phone records showed several short calls made during the party, including one at 11:42 p.m. to an unknown number. He claimed it was to arrange for more drinks to be brought in, but the number was unregistered, making it impossible to verify without further digging. Investigators also noted that his upstairs bathroom contained a damp towel and faint reddish stains along the edge of the sink, though tests were still pending to determine if it was blood. By the end of the second day, the detectives had a collection of scattered clues, a suspicious host, an open window that might be a distraction, an unaccounted-for phone call, and the physical evidence of the cup and the hair. The challenge was weaving these pieces together into a coherent picture. Somewhere in those fragments lay the truth about Emily Carter's final moments. But for now, all they had was a growing list of people who might have wanted her gone. The lab results came back faster than expected, giving investigators their first solid lead. The fingerprints on the red plastic cup matched Alex Morgan, a junior at Westwood University and someone who had known Emily since her freshman year. They had once been close, but their friendship had ended abruptly the previous semester for reasons no one seemed able to explain clearly. Some said there had been a disagreement over a group project, others hinted at something more personal. Whatever the truth, Alex had not been on good terms with Emily in recent months. Detectives brought Alex in for questioning. He admitted being at the party but claimed he left before midnight and had nothing to do with Emily's death. He insisted the cup must have been from earlier in the night when they had briefly spoken in the kitchen. His story was thin and lacked witnesses to confirm his whereabouts after he supposedly left. Still, there was no direct evidence placing him in the bedroom when Emily died, only the cup and his connection to her past. Meanwhile, forensic testing on the strands of hair found in the room produced a surprising twist. They belonged to a woman, not Alex. This complicated the narrative and hinted at the possibility that more than one person had been in that room with Emily. If Alex had been there, he might not have been alone. If he hadn't, someone else entirely could be responsible, using the cup as a red herring. Detectives began digging deeper into footage from the night of the party. Dozens of phone videos, taken by students and posted online, were collected. In one clip, time-stamped at 11:34 p.m., a figure wearing a dark hoodie could be seen moving quickly toward the stairs, keeping their head turned away from the camera. Their body language suggested they were trying not to be noticed. Minutes later, another video showed the same figure lingering at the top of the stairs, half hidden in the shadows. The grainy quality made it impossible to confirm the person's identity, but their build was slim, and their hair appeared to be pulled back tightly, matching the profile of several women at the party. Outside the house, security footage from a streetlight camera captured a shadowy person leaving through the side alley at 12:10 a.m., just after Emily's estimated time of death. The person moved quickly, their hood pulled up, and their face obscured. Though the footage was low quality, their stature and gait seemed consistent with the figure seen on the phone videos. Investigators now considered the possibility that Emily had been lured upstairs deliberately. If that was the case, the motive could range from a heated personal dispute to something far more calculated. They looked into Emily's recent history and found she had made several large cash withdrawals from her bank account in the past 2 weeks. Friends claimed she was helping someone with financial trouble, though no one knew who. This led detectives to revisit the list of people Emily had been in contact with that day. Among the names was Jessica Hill, Emily's roommate and closest friend since freshman year. Jessica had been at the party, but her initial statement claimed she stayed downstairs the entire time. However, new witness accounts placed her near the top of the stairs at around 11:40, roughly the same time the hooded figure was first spotted. When questioned again, Jessica appeared nervous but stuck to her story, insisting she had only gone upstairs briefly to use the bathroom. She denied any argument or conflict with Emily that night. Yet her phone records showed multiple calls between her and Alex Morgan in the hours before the party began. The two claimed the calls were unrelated to Emily, but their sudden closeness, combined with their potential presence upstairs, was hard for detectives to ignore. As the pieces came together, a troubling theory emerged. Jessica could have been the woman whose hair was found in the room, and Alex could have been involved in some way, either directly or as part of a cover-up. It was possible one of them had killed Emily while the other acted as a lookout or helped create an escape route. But without clear proof, this was still only speculation. Detectives began quietly monitoring both suspects, watching for any contact between them or unusual behavior. They also submitted the hoodie seen in the videos for enhancement, hoping technology could reveal more identifying details. Somewhere between the fingerprints, the hair, and the grainy footage lay the answer to who had taken Emily Carter's life. For now, the investigation was a puzzle with too many edges missing. But the pressure was building, and the truth was starting to take shape. The break in the case came not from the grainy footage but from a device Emily had carried everywhere, her phone. While it had been collected on the night of the murder, the backlog of digital evidence processing meant it had taken weeks for technicians to work through its contents. Buried in the Notes app was a single entry, created just 3 days before. her death. It read, "If anything happens to me, look at the roommate." The message was short, unpunctuated, and offered no explanation, but its meaning was unmistakable. Emily had suspected someone close to her, and she had written it down for a reason. Detectives brought Jessica Hill back in for questioning. She maintained her story from before, claiming she had been downstairs for nearly the entire night and had only gone upstairs to use the bathroom once. But when confronted with the note from Emily's phone, her composure faltered. She admitted that she and Emily had argued earlier in the week, but she insisted it was only about money. Emily had lent her several $100s to cover rent, and Jessica had been late repaying it. She denied that the disagreement had been serious enough to lead to violence. Witness statements painted a different picture. Multiple students now confirmed seeing Jessica near the top of the stairs around the same time Emily went up. One person recalled seeing her speaking in a low voice to someone wearing a dark hoodie, though they couldn't identify the other person. That description matched the unknown figure from the party footage. Investigators pressed Jessica about her relationship with Alex Morgan. She initially claimed they were just casual acquaintances, but phone records told another story. In the 2 days before the party, they had exchanged more than a dozen calls and messages, many of them late at night. When confronted, Jessica admitted she and Alex had been secretly seeing each other for weeks. She claimed Emily had recently found out and had been angry about it, though she wouldn't explain why. With this new information, detectives turned their focus back to Alex. He had insisted from the beginning that he left the party early, but the timeline was starting to unravel. Phone GPS data placed him within 2 blocks of the house until shortly after midnight. This matched the window of time in which Emily was killed. When pressed, Alex shifted his story slightly, saying he had stepped outside for fresh air and then walked around the block before deciding to leave. The theory forming in the minds of investigators was unsettling. Jessica and Alex had both been in the vicinity of the bedroom where Emily died. Both had motives, financial and personal, and both had lied in their initial statements. Whether they acted together or separately was still unclear, but the overlap in their movements was becoming impossible to ignore. A deeper look into Emily's recent behavior revealed that she had been withdrawing money not only for Jessica's rent but also, possibly, to cover a debt Jessica owed to someone else. This added a layer of urgency to the potential motive. If Emily had threatened to expose the debt or Jessica's secret relationship with Alex, tensions could have escalated quickly as the evidence mounted. Jessica's explanations grew thinner. She insisted she had no reason to harm Emily and that Alex was the one who had been angry. Alex, for his part, turned the suspicion back on Jessica, claiming she had asked him to come upstairs that night, but that he had refused. Each accused the other, forcing detectives to navigate a web of lies. The grainy footage of the hooded figure lingered in the background of the investigation. Enhanced still frames suggested the person's build and hairline matched Jessica's profile, though the image was too distorted for definitive proof. Detectives began to consider the possibility that Jessica had lured Emily upstairs under some pretense, confronted her in the bedroom, and then staged the open window to make it appear as though the killer had escaped outside to move forward. Investigators needed physical evidence linking either suspect directly to the scene at the moment of the murder. For now, they had only circumstantial connections: hair in the carpet, fingerprints on a cup, and inconsistent timelines. Still, the feeling among the team was that the case was inching closer to the truth. The threads tying Jessica and Alex together were tightening, and one of them was bound to snap under the pressure. It was a single overlooked detail that finally broke the case. Weeks after the initial crime scene processing, a forensic analyst re-examined the items collected from the bedroom. Under Emily's fingernails was a tiny, nearly invisible fiber that had been missed in the first sweep. Under a microscope, it appeared to be a thin strand of synthetic fabric, deep black in color, with a specific weave pattern common in certain brands of athletic hoodies. When the fiber was compared against clothing seized from potential suspects, the match was immediate. It belonged to a black hoodie recovered from Jessica Hill's car. The hoodie had been found stuffed inside a plastic grocery bag in the trunk, tucked under a pile of old textbooks. Jessica had claimed she hadn't worn it in months and didn't even remember it being in the car. But testing revealed traces of Emily's DNA along the neckline and faint impressions consistent with the bruising pattern on Emily's neck. The evidence was damning. Detectives moved quickly. Jessica was arrested at her apartment without warning, taken in while still in her pajamas. The moment she was in custody, the dynamic of the investigation shifted. With the fiber, the DNA, and the timeline of her movements on the night of the party, prosecutors now had a clear path to charge her with murder. The story that emerged was far simpler and far more tragic than the tangled theories that had filled the weeks of speculation. According to the prosecution's reconstruction, Jessica and Emily's friendship had been unraveling for months. The financial dispute over the borrowed rent money had become tense, and Emily had recently discovered Jessica's secret relationship with Alex Morgan. Witnesses confirmed that Emily had been angry about the deception, not out of jealousy, but because she believed Jessica was using Alex to get out of her debts. The confrontation that began in private spilled over into the night of the party at some point after 11:30 p.m., Jessica convinced Emily to follow her upstairs to talk in private, away from the crowd and the music. Whether Jessica had planned the violence in advance or acted in a sudden burst of anger was never conclusively proven, but once they were in the bedroom, the argument escalated. Forensic analysis showed signs of a brief struggle, disturbed items on the small table, a knocked-over lamp, and faint abrasions on Emily's forearms suggesting she had tried to defend herself. The open window was a calculated move. Investigators determined Jessica had opened it immediately after the murder to create the illusion that someone else had escaped that way. It was why no footprints were found outside, and why the timeline for an outside suspect never truly fit. Alex Morgan's role was ultimately peripheral. His fingerprints on the cup came from earlier in the night, and while he had been in contact with Jessica before the party, there was no physical evidence linking him to the bedroom or the murder itself. His evasiveness during questioning was attributed to his fear of being implicated because of his relationship with Jessica, not because he had taken part in the crime. Once Jessica's arrest was made public, Alex cooperated fully, confirming that Jessica had been increasingly desperate about her debts and worried Emily might tell others about their disputes. The trial drew intense attention both on campus and in the media. Jessica maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she had been framed and that the hoodie must have been tampered with. The jury didn't believe her. The fiber under Emily's fingernail, the matching DNA, the witness sightings on the stairs, and the cryptic note Emily had left pointing toward her roommate formed a chain of evidence too strong to break. After a 2-week trial, Jessica was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. For Westwood University, the aftermath was sobering. The house where the party had taken place became an empty shell, avoided by most students who had once crowded its rooms. Emily Carter's death left a permanent mark on the campus community, a reminder that danger can come from the people closest to you, and that beneath the noise and celebration of a night like that, darkness can be waiting silently for its moment to strike. Even now, years later, students walking past the sagging White House lower their voices. They know the story by heart, told in whispers between new arrivals each year. The party that began as the highlight of the semester had ended as one of the darkest nights in the university's history, and the truth had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a single thread to unravel.